Hilery. So today I'd like to share a little with you about how our stories hold us back. And I think we all have our stories pretty well memorized because we cling to them, but maybe this is a new concept to you. And sorry, but he's snoring. I'm just going to give you kind of an introduction to why this is important so that we can heal and move forward in life. So even if you only tell your story to yourself, it's one that you repeat over and over again. So it becomes part of your identity. But when you tell others your story, it actually validates it and confirms it as even more part of your identity. So here's some examples of stories people tell. I was abused as a child. I was abandoned. We were poor growing up. My father left when I was 8 years old. I'm a cancer survivor. I come from a broken home. I'm divorced. I'm a diabetic. I suffer from depression. My father was an alcoholic. My parents were immigrants. I was the black sheep of the family, or I am the black sheep of the family. I am fat. I was a nerd in school. I was bullied growing up. I feel like you may have one of those stories as your own. They're all really common stories that people tell. So if none of those hit home, I just want you to take a moment and think about what stories you repeatedly tell to yourself and to others. So what do most people know about you? Or what do your closest friends know about you? What is the story that you've told them all? The problem with these stories is that unless you've actually done some work on them to make them empowering, our stories almost always make us the victim. They actually hold us back. They weigh us down and they can either prevent us from moving forward or slow us way down. And this is why it's important. We use our stories as an excuse not to take a path, or not to take a risk, or not to make a change in our lives. We use our stories to get sympathy and pity sometimes. We use our stories as a mask, so we don't have to reveal our true selves. And I want to give you an example of a common story that people tell a lot. So one of the most common stories I feel people have is, I'm just not good enough. And when you struggle, you might find yourself saying things like, I'm just not good enough, I'm not talented enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not interesting enough, I'm not popular enough to succeed. Other versions of this story can come out as, I am who I am. I was just raised that way. No matter how much I practice, I'll never beat people who are naturally gifted. So these are all different versions of the same story that boils down to, I'm just not good enough. I'm just not good enough to achieve the things I want, and there's no way I can get better. So this is actually one of the most attractive personal narratives because it lets you off the hook. You're off the hook for your own success because you're just not good enough. And believing that you're simply not good enough actually exonerates you from the responsibility to change, to grow, and to rise to challenges, which makes sense. Change is hard work. Self-improvement is a road filled with pain, failure, rejection. Believing that your talent is fixed gives you permission to remain stagnant. And it shifts your responsibility for your own life to factors outside of your control. You're blaming it on your upbringing, you blame it on your genes, you blame it on your past. And as painful as it is to believe that you're not good enough, this story serves to actually avoid more pain. And that's the pain of growth. If you're just not good enough and you can't become good enough, then there's no reason to try to improve. So this is how just this little story holds us back from ever really growing. And we can kind of tiptoe out and try something and then like immediately come back to, oh, I'm just not good enough. We go try one art class or try to paint one painting and we're like, oh my God, that came out like crap. I'm just not good at this. It's like, no, nobody's good their first time. It takes repeated practice. Like they say, it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at one little thing. I think there's a Bruce Lee quote. I don't know it exactly, but he said, I'm not afraid of the man that can do 10,000 different kicks. I'm afraid of the man that's practiced one kick 10,000 times. So we use these stories as a way of holding us back. And this is just one story, but I find it a very popular one that a lot of people have. And so I want you to think about, like what stories have you been clinging to that hold you back? And a lot of times, some of our stories that hold us back started back in childhood. That I know, like my parents were raised in a time of children are to be seen, not heard. And so that was ingrained in their upbringing that like their voice didn't matter. And so it becomes very hard as an adult to speak up because you were raised in a way that you weren't supposed to speak up, that you were supposed to just be quiet and well behaved and well mannered, and your voice wasn't important. And so when you're raised with that all through your childhood, then it starts to come into your adulthood too. And so that story could hold somebody back for their entire lives if they didn't work on it, if they didn't see the reality of the story. And that's the problem. Generally, our stories are just beliefs and they're not factual. So if you look back at your story and where it originated and you took away all the emotions from it and just looked at the facts, it will probably change your narrative. It will change your story, because what happens is we apply our emotions onto it. And we almost want to become the victim, even though this isn't like a conscious decision. I don't think consciously anybody wants to be a victim. I think most people do want to be the victor and the hero and the warrior in the story, or I do at least. But this is just a way that we become the victim, and it becomes an excuse not to grow into the full version of ourselves. But the beauty of this is that this is just called having a fixed mindset. And we each have the decision to be in a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And if you're in the growth mindset, instead of treating your capability as fixed in that I'm not good enough example, you could say, I can grow and learn, and I can change as a person by trying to work towards new goals. And so by adopting this new story, you're starting to say, I am good enough right now. I'm good enough to build on the talent that I currently have in order to become more talented down the road. And so you start to take more risks and you start to step outside your comfort zone and practice and try new things and learn that your talent is a dynamic process. It's not fixed, and that with continuous or consistent self-improvement, that you will continually grow and you don't have to cling to that story anymore. So we always, with our stories, can change them and make a new reality. But as long as we're clinging to the stories of our past, we are going to be limited and held back by our past. And for me, like what I like to think about it in terms of our physical body, right? Every 7 years, every single cell in our body is entirely different. We're not even the same human, like at all, not a single cell, nothing. So it's one of those things that like, why does something that happened in our childhood still shape us today and hold us back and limit us and make us think in these skewed ways that are only really hurting and damaging us? It becomes a pattern. It becomes part of our personality over time, years of thinking the same thing. It's a personality trait. So trying to think about these stories and the way that they're holding you back is really important in order to move forward. So one way of rewriting the story is to look at it from that perspective. Okay, what are the facts? What actually happened? Take my emotions out of it. I was abandoned. I'm unlovable. That story, when you look it up and you're like, okay, yeah, my mom gave me away to my grandparents to raise me. I'm just unlovable. I'm unworthy of love. Well, is that the truth? If you actually looked at the facts, what happened? Your mother was young. She wasn't in a capable place to raise a child, and in turn gave you to her parents because they could provide a better life for you. And that might have been physically, financially, emotionally, mentally. You have no idea what was truly going on at the time, most likely. And you were loved. Your grandparents did love you. They did provide a good life for you. They did care for you and give you everything you needed to grow. And so that story of I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy of love, I was abandoned, it's not completely factual. It's only one little tiny piece of the story that you've been clinging to with your entire identity. So this is why it's really important to find the facts of the story instead of just the beliefs. And anytime you have a story, like, your beliefs are yours. They're yours to choose. So if you want to believe that, one religion over another, that's a choice. You chose to believe that religion as yours. It doesn't mean that's the ultimate and only religion. We know how many religions there are in the world, right? You can choose to believe whatever you want. And so with these stories, it's the same thing. If you're choosing to believe the victim role for so long, what if you chose the empowered role instead? What if you took the facts and actually said, okay, yeah, this happened, but now I know this, and I'm going to step into the victor and the hero and the warrior and choose the hero's journey instead. And so you want to think about what you prefer to believe in these circumstances, because you can believe that, you're unlovable because you were abandoned, or you could believe, you know what, I've become a really good person and I treat people right. I always do the right thing, even when nobody's looking. I'm a good human being. I put others first. I care for others. I treat people the right way. And I'm really deserving of a loving relationship. Which do you want to cling to? Because the choice is yours. And so even something like, I am fat. Well, is that really who you are? No. Could be like, okay, my body isn't exactly where I want it to be, but I'm working on it. And I've decided that, I'm a work in progress and I'm working on losing weight. And this is just part of the journey. For some reason, I gained weight. You can look at the connections in the past of when it started and what happened, or maybe it started in childhood and maybe there's a health condition involved. But you as a human, are you fat? Like, is that your entire identity that you're clinging to? Because you're way more than your body weight. That is one part of our entire being. And so it's up to you to choose what you're believing and what you're narrating and feeding to yourself. Because if you're saying to yourself day after day after day, oh my God, I'm so fat. Oh my God, I'm so fat. I hate my body. What benefit does that bring? And where does that keep you? It keeps you stuck being fat and hating your body. So changing your thoughts to more empowering thoughts, to more loving thoughts is really important. And I'm going to go one step deeper into why. So this is because our subconscious brains rule our lives. So it's really important to acknowledge this, that 90 to 95% of our thoughts are from our subconscious mind every day. It's a computer program that's running below the surface that we're not even aware of. Only 5 to 10% of our thoughts are conscious. And this is why it makes it so hard to change, is because only 5% of our thoughts says, I want to get healthy. I want to lose weight. I want to work out. I want to eat right. That's 5% of our thoughts. The other 95% are still wired to think, I love pizza. It's the best thing. I like sitting on the couch. I don't want to get up. And our ego part of our brain really doesn't like change. It associates any type of change with death. It thinks change is not good. Change means I could die. It's a very primordial part of our lizard brain, reptilian brain, that is wired to keep us alive. And it knows that safety is in maintaining the same routine. So anytime you try to implement a change, it's the ego brain that's saying, no, I don't want to do that. I don't truly want to do that. So you've got 95% of you saying, I don't want to do that, and 5% saying you do. Who do you think is going to win? This is what makes it so difficult to change. So here's some interesting facts about the subconscious brain. It records everything. It never forgets. It's always alert and awake, even when you're sleeping. It controls 95% of our lives, and it's built on our habits. So the more habitual you are around something, the more it gets ingrained in the subconscious. And that's what makes the story so important, because your story has become a habit. It's something that is clung to for probably years and years of time. And so by clinging to it over and over, it becomes ingrained in the subconscious. The subconscious speaks to you in your dreams. So this is why dream interpretation is a really cool thing to get into if you're a vivid dreamer. The subconscious is always trying to send you messages to wake you up to certain things in your waking life. And so it sends them in really weird ways sometimes. It sends it in not so obvious ways and pretty obvious ways at times. It speaks to you in dreams because it actually has no verbal language. So it doesn't really truly have the ability to communicate you in words. And that's why it can be hard to think about the subconscious brain, because at first when I heard about it, I was like, wait, like 90% of my thoughts are exactly the same day after day. Shouldn't I be able to write them down on paper and identify them? And I didn't realize that it's not the conscious brain with words. It's the subconscious brain that's made of feelings. And so even though like these stories are on auto repeat, it's almost like the emotional and belief of the story is what's in the repetitive system. It's not always the words per se. The subconscious can do like a trillion things at once. It's almost like the smartest computer in the world. But it's not logical. It's the feeling mind. So it's based around feelings and not logic. This is really important, but I'll get into that in a second. And they say it's 1 million times more powerful than the conscious mind. I don't know that number is really accurate. I would say it's 95 times more powerful than the conscious mind, but it is really powerful. And the thing that goes wrong is that because it's not functioning on words, it goes a little haywire with this one certain thing, and that's your language. It's built to empower you to get whatever you want. It's a really, really smart computer, right? So it's always trying to enable you and help you. But it doesn't understand the word no. So when you say you don't want something, it thinks you want it. It wants to help you get it. So that's where it goes kind of crazy with the wiring. So when you say, I don't want people to avoid me, it hears, I want people to avoid me. When you say, I don't want to be bored, it says, I want to be bored. When you say, I don't want to be late, it hears, I want to be late. And if you said, I don't want to be broke, it hears, I want to be broke. And this is why a lot of times we attract exactly what we don't want into our lives, is because we're hyper focused on what we don't want instead of what we do want. And so the way to kind of trick out the subconscious, because of this way that it functions, is focusing on what you do want. And that is, you've probably heard of the law of attraction. Like focusing on what you do want will help you manifest it and bring it into your life. And so this is a way of kind of tricking it. You don't want to focus on, I don't want to be late. You want to focus on, I want to be on time. So you're just switching it. You're not focusing on the negative, you're focusing on the positive. I don't want to be broke. I want to be successful. I want to be financially stable. I am financially stable. Changing something to I want to I am is like way more powerful for the subconscious languaging. But as far as, it's just not focusing on the negative. And a lot of times in life, because of the way our brain works and the ego of being in fear of different things, basically the fear of uncertainty, we tend to focus on what we don't want. And the power is changing that inner languaging to focus on what you do want in your life in order to attract more of that into your life. Otherwise, you start to find yourself attracting the same negative situations again and again and again. So if you think about this, what is a recurring theme around the drama of your life? So is it, did you have controlling parents, super controlling parents, and then you ended up getting into a controlling relationship, and then your boss at work is super controlling, and your best friend is controlling, and your social circle is controlling, and your partner is controlling? Everything starts to come around the same exact theme of you being controlled by somebody else, you being manipulated by somebody else. That's how we bring the same situation over again and again and again. So I'm going to give you an example of how the inferiority complex can form. So as a child, a parent is constantly correcting the child. No, you're doing it wrong. Don't do it that way. Do it this way. It's coming from a place of love, right? We want our children to do the right thing and be able to do something well. But when you hear it all the time and it's repeated again and again, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. You're not doing it right. What happens? You start to feel stupid. You feel like you can never do anything right. And so as a child, that gets really ingrained in you, and you get afraid and almost not want to try because you know you're going to do it wrong. It becomes a belief system now. After years of this, the child feels like, I must not be smart, They tend to sit back in an effort not to make a mistake. So they're not going to raise their hand in class because they know they're always wrong, so they don't want to be embarrassed. They're not going to feel like, speaking up, because that fear of being wrong, it's not even a fear of being wrong, it's a belief. It's a belief that, oh, I'm always wrong, I always get it wrong. They want another kid to do it first because that way they can learn how to do it right. So these feelings of guilt and inadequacy pile up, and incorrect perceptions start to lead to feelings of inferiority and unworthiness. And so our subconscious, it always wants to be right, because when it's right, it thinks it's in control. It likes to be in control. It's not logical, it's based on feelings. So that child then grows into an adult that attracts different situations consistently to validate those feelings of being stupid and being inferior to others. And this could be from the friendships they're in, to the bosses they have, the work they're doing, the relationships they have, the romantic relationships they have. They start to almost seek out on a subconscious level these people that make them feel inferior. And so it's totally not conscious. It's a subconscious thing that we're attracting these situations into our life again and again and again, because our subconscious wants to be right. Our ego wants to be right. So this is why we tend to attract the same situations over again and again and again. So I want you to think about what patterns you've attracted into your life. Is it abandonment issues? Do you feel broken? Do you feel inferior or stupid all the time? Like you're not good enough? Are you lonely a lot? Do you always feel alone? You don't have good friends. You don't have a good social circle. You don't have community. Do you feel like you're not smart enough? You're not talented enough? You're stupid. It's kind of inferiority, but it might feel different to you. Poverty mindset. Are you always broke? Are you always struggling to make ends meet? Do you only have enough money to survive? Self-sacrifice. Are you always sacrificing your own needs for others? Are you a people pleaser? This is a traumatic response. It is not a healthy way of being. There's a difference between being nice, kind, and thoughtful to self-sacrifice. Totally different things. Do you feel unlovable? Something happened with your parents? A lot of times, if there's anything off with your parental relationship or any of your family relationships, because those are our inner circle and our closest relationships, it can really impact us that we just feel unlovable. Well, if they don't love me, then why would anybody else, right? Like, I mean, they're my family. So if they can't love me, like, I just must be unlovable. I must be broken. Or unworthiness. And unworthiness can show up in a lot of different shapes and forms. It can be that you are under eating, you're not feeding yourself because you just attribute it to, oh, I'm so busy, I just forgot. But in reality, it's, I'm not worthy of being nourished. It's a lack of self-care, not being able to do things for yourself, always self-sacrificing and never taking care of your own needs can be coming from unworthiness. So it's a way of saying like, well, I'm not important for self-care. Like I'm not worthy of it. It can come up and also being overweight is a way, well, I'm overweight, I must not be worthy of love, or I'm not worthy of success, or whatever it is. You know better than I do what those thoughts are that are going on in your mind, that you've attracted these things again and again, and you can see it that like, okay, yeah, I had that in my childhood, I had that in my teen years, I had that in my 20s, I had that in my 30s. Like this has just gone on again and again and again. And I have, my best friend has always been like this. My boss has always been like this. My boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, partner has always been like this. Like, oh my God, I married my mother. Like I've heard these things again and again and again. So finding the lessons in our patterns is really important because it can break the pattern. We want to be able to let go of the past and move forward into what we truly want and desire. And because our subconscious is so strong, we have to understand these things in order to outsmart it, essentially. We've only got 5 to 7% of our brain power to outsmart the other 90 to 95%. So understanding these things, getting to the root of these issues is extremely important for your long-term happiness. So some ways to find the lessons in our patterns is looking at these past relationships and say, what have these been trying to teach me? What have I not been paying attention to? What do I need to assert verbally or non-verbally to become stronger? How do I step out of the victim role and into an empowered role? How can you change the story? What do I need to learn about my patterns of behavior that attract this type of relationship into my life? How can I break the cycle? And what am I gaining by remaining in these relationships? A lot of the chronic illness world, they always ask you what you're gaining from your illness in order for you to understand what may be holding you back from healing. I always thought it was an interesting question. So by answering empowering questions and setting your intentions to move on from the past, you will actually help yourself receive the lesson so that you can move forward. So I'm just going to leave you with that today. This month in the Wellness Club, we'll be talking a lot about the chakra system and healing the past. on an energetic level and a subconscious level. We'll be doing some journaling exercises, some guided meditations, and just talking about healing at least one part of our story. So I will share more about the chakras next time, but I want you to just contemplate your stories this week and think about the patterns that you have attracted into your life again and again and again. And I'm excited to dive a little deeper into healing this month with you. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.